building a better Bay Area, moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC7 News.
Hi everybody, I'm Dion Lim and you are watching Getting Answers live here on ABC7. What we do is we ask experts your questions every day at 3 o'clock to get you answers in real time. We do have a jam-packed show for you today, including U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who has arrived in Taiwan amid tensions with China. We have Newsweek's senior foreign policy writer who will join us to talk about the significance and the potential implications of her visit. Also, two San Francisco leaders are facing controversy, both accused of making racially insensitive remarks. Mayor London Breed just talked about this with our media partners at the SF Standard. They will be here with her reaction and much more. But first, California's legislature sent a letter to Governor Gavin Newsom today petitioning for an emergency state budget appropriation, all to help counties respond to the monkeypox outbreak. So joining us live right now to talk about that letter and much more on monkeypox, State Senator Scott Wiener. Scott, always a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's talk about this letter because the timing of this comes a day after we saw the governor declare that state of emergency over monkeypox. So what do you and other leaders hope to accomplish with this request?
Well, monkeypox is, this outbreak is extremely concerning. If we don't get it under control quickly, it will spread. Other communities could be impacted, not just gay and bisexual men. And tragically, this virus could become what we call endemic, meaning that it becomes a regular part of life in our country and could emerge over and over again. And so we need to act quickly. And what we're asking, I'm thrilled that the governor declared a state of emergency, Mayor Breed as well. We need to make sure that our counties, our county public health departments, which are on the front lines, that they have the resources necessary to expand vaccination clinics and staffing, to expand testing capability, to do more outreach, and to expand treatment. We don't want the counties to be out there on their own without resources. And so we're asking the state to provide about $35 million to the counties to help them with these critical and time-sensitive public health efforts.
Yeah, and we really have seen San Francisco respond really with force. We've seen a number of monkeypox vaccine events and public awareness notes go out to the public. Now, speaking of that budget and county resources, to be precise, I think it's what, $38.5 million being requested. What exactly does that money go toward? I know you mentioned some of that county outreach. Is it for volunteers and really spreading the word? And you've always been a proponent
Sure.
of education.
Absolutely. So of that $38.5 million, $35 million would be for our county public health departments. And if to control this, of course, we need more vaccine supply from the federal government, which has been a big problem, but that is starting to change. San Francisco just announced that our next allocation of vaccines will be more than double the one that we received just recently. So we're starting to see at least some movement in terms of more vaccine doses. But what we need is to make sure that our counties have the staffing and the ability to stand up vaccination clinics, testing clinics. We're going to see better testing technology, I think, pretty soon to be able to test for asymptomatic monkeypox infections. But again, these things don't just appear. You have to have clinics and staffing, qualified people who are able to, day in and day out, do the testing, do the vaccination. We also need much more outreach, and particularly, it's not just about San Francisco. This is starting to spread in other counties that don't have the same resources that a San Francisco or a Los Angeles have, and we need to make sure they are able to get particularly into our most marginalized communities, gay and bisexual men. We're also seeing that the two racial communities or racial groups that are most impacted are white people and Latinos. And so we need to make sure that we are reaching deep into our Latino communities, in addition to our LGBTQ communities.
You know, it's so interesting. I see so many parallels with when coronavirus had first broken out, and it was all about educating and getting that data and really spreading awareness. So a lot of things that I feel like parallel one another. You know, all of this sounds great, the plan that you had laid out and where the resources are going. Do you actually think the governor will approve this?
we don't know yet. It's always, budget is always a negotiation between the legislature and the governor. I have been, our Senate leader, Senator Tony Atkins from San Diego, has been very supportive of the work we've been doing and a staunch supporter of our LGBTQ communities as a member of the community herself. And the Speaker of the Assembly, Anthony Rendon, has been extremely vocal about various needs to support the response to monkeypox, including the need for resources. And we've been working with their staffs, and I think we're going to get a lot of support in the legislature. But we have to, we'll of course work with the governor and his administration. And I'm optimistic we'll be able to come to a resolution.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to be during these times. And of course, we'll continue to follow the situation. Before we get to the next question, I do want to remind everyone we are live on Facebook.com/ABC7 News. So if you have any questions for the senator, please leave them in the comments section. Senator Wiener, over the weekend, we had the Dory Alley Street Fair. We covered it from the lens of how things have changed. And I know you made a tweet urging people to still have fun. People have to live their lives, and that reducing the risk is still possible. And you also talked about avoiding making the mistakes of the 80s, and especially when it came to HIV, how closing these public bathhouses was not a viable option and didn't really have any proof of working. How do you strike that balance? What is your recommendation between responsibility and the very real fear of this disease?
Yeah, so, and I think it's important for people to understand, because some people on the right wing are saying, oh, well, you made us stay home for COVID, and so therefore you should shut everything down in the LGBTQ community for monkeypox. This is a very different virus than COVID, as was HIV. Mm-hmm. COVID is the kind of virus where if I have it, I walk into a room with 20 people, just by breathing, I can infect, many of them. That's not monkeypox. Monkeypox, it is not something where you walk into a room and you start randomly infecting people. It takes skin-to-skin contact, typically with a lesion. And so you can be around other people and have a fantastic time and still reduce or all but eliminate the risk of transmission. The same is true of HIV. You can be around other people and have no risk for HIV. Mm-hmm. And in the 1980s, San Francisco closed all the gay bathhouses to say, we don't want people to have sex. Well, of course, people are still going to have sex if you close the gay bathhouses, and they did. And HIV continued to spread. But instead of having a centralized location where you can outreach to people, provide information, testing, in the case of monkeypox, vaccination, people just go into the shadows where they're not reachable. And so at the Dory Alley Street Fair on Sunday, the Department of Public Health had outreach workers there. There was information, health information being given out. There was even some testing that was being done on people, not people who had symptoms, but asymptomatic people. And so that's a good thing. And if you just start shutting everything down, you're not really even reducing the risk. All you're doing is not having a centralized location to reach out to the community.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, especially because the two diseases are very different, and the response has to be treated as such. I know we only have a few seconds, but I do want to ask you this. How do you feel the White House has responded in terms of monkeypox? I know there was a coordinator for it that was just named.
I think the federal government is starting to step up, and I want to give the administration credit for that. I will say the federal government, initially, it was a very flat-footed, sluggish response, and there was not enough of a sense of urgency. Mm-hmm. We've seen that start to change, and so I'm optimistic moving forward. But the federal government has to do everything in its power to dramatically expand the supply of vaccines, including making sure that the small manufacturer of this vaccine, which the U.S. government funded to create that vaccine, that they license out the vaccine to larger manufacturers. So like with COVID, we can have big manufacturers producing a huge amount of this vaccine, because as it spreads, there will be more demand, and we need to be prepared to meet it.
Okay, I'm sure we will talk with you again very shortly. Senator Scott Wiener, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, well, up next, we will dive into Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan and the response on the international stage. Make sure to get your questions in as soon as you can. Stay with us. Getting Answers continues after this short break. Okay, we are on commercial break on the air and then also on Facebook.com/ABC7 News as we speak. Let me see if I can scroll through some of these comments. For all of you who do not know, it looks like we do have some questions. Hold on, let me scroll through. You'll have to... Oh, I appreciate that. Sherry is my fearless director. She is giving me some feedback and some notes in my little earpiece right now, just so everybody knows what goes on in the commercial break and in the making of this show. There is a lot happening because in addition to really monitoring all of these comments, questions, any concerns people have, and then on the fly trying to make sense of all of them, which ones need to rise to the top, which ones are of most urgency, which ones not to pay attention to because we do not tolerate bullying or harassment of any kind here. And then we have the navigating of our iPad and all of the questions that we have prepared, and then also as a conversation develops, how are we going to segue or navigate these questions and these conversations so that they make sense. So always something that we have to keep in mind. And my also equally fearless director, Douglas, just spoke with me. How much time did you say? 52 seconds. That is so precise. So everybody, I appreciate you all being here. I am also on Facebook and all social media as well. I am Dion Lim TV. So again, any questions about Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, if you have feelings about it strongly one way or another, let me know. I'll see if I can bring them to our next guest, who is a specialist and has been covering this for quite some time. All right, we are a few seconds away, taking a quick water break, and we will be right back on the air. Oh, by the way, we are getting one comment asking Ubelesita, I believe is Ubicella, asking about another lockdown with monkeypox. Still too early to tell. Welcome back, everybody. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is making history today, becoming the highest-ranking American official to visit Taiwan in 25 years. Her visit, though, is not without controversy. Even though Taiwan is a self-ruled island, it's claimed by China. As you can imagine, it has been a long-standing point of contention, which is why China is now threatening retaliation over Pelosi's visit. So joining us now to discuss this topic is Newsweek's senior foreign policy writer, Tom O'Connor. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, to get everyone up to speed, tell us why this trip is so significant. Also, tell me about the timing. Why now?
Well, it's significant because this is the first visit for a House Speaker to Taiwan in 25 years. And so it's something that doesn't happen quite often. We have seen some members of Congress, some former officials travel to Taiwan. Those trips were not without controversy either. Of course, China opposes those sort of visits, but this one certainly is the most high profile and has elicited the strongest response. As for the timing of this, a lot of people are linking it to the midterm elections here, the possibility that, of course, the Democrats could lose the House. And of course, Nancy Pelosi has been in her position for quite some time right now. So I think there's sort of a legacy thing involved here as well. At the same time, in November, we are seeing the Chinese Communist Party Congress coming up. So of course, over there too, this is being regarded as a particularly sensitive time for this to happen.
Yeah, and the threats coming from China have been so robust, so strong. I mean, that messaging is downright scary, but Pelosi also has had strong messaging to support the people of Taiwan. How has that been responded to by the Biden administration?
Well, I think this kind of puts the Biden administration in quite a difficult position. Now, of course, we've seen the White House sort of want to distance itself from this. The president has not explicitly endorsed the trip. In fact, in the past, he had said that he thought the military believed it wasn't a good idea. So we're not seeing much actually coming out in the way of endorsements or opposition from the White House. They're just saying that they will respect the decision for Nancy Pelosi to do this. So I think it is kind of awkward given the fact that the president does seem to have wanted to amplify engagement with China. Recently, we've seen a lot of high-level engagement, particularly with last week's call with President Xi Jinping. I was told by the White House that there seemed to be a lot of initiatives spoken about during that call that they would look to follow up on. I'm not sure how that's going to happen right now after this visit. As for the fallout of this, we're not really sure exactly how far China is actually willing to go. The White House is downplaying this, saying that this is just part of the course when it comes to U.S.-China relations, that this has happened before. But China does seem particularly offended by this, and we are seeing announcements now, as you mentioned, some heightened rhetoric of People's Liberation Army exercises in the region. So yeah, it is something that is quite a precarious situation, and both sides are saying that the risk of miscalculation is quite high.
Well, with that military presence and the increase of it, what is security like for Taiwan given the threat and the messaging from China?
We know that U.S. military aircraft brought Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. We know that there is U.S. military presence in the region. They're not necessarily linking that directly to what's going on in Taiwan right now, but of course, it's a response to the situation in general in that part of the world. At the same time, of course, this is the part of the region where China has most of its forces assembled, the Eastern Theater Command, the Southern Theater Command. We're seeing China sending its warships and warplanes into the Taiwan Strait and surrounding Taiwan to an extent that it's even higher than the 1996 Taiwan Strait crisis, which is the last time tensions perhaps were this high. So China certainly wants to show that it can present a threat to Taiwan Island. Now, Taiwan does have its own native defenses, of course, but the military imbalance is very striking when it comes to the People's Liberation Army versus Taiwan's own forces. So it is something that, of course, I'm sure Taiwan is concerned about. And we're not hearing much from Taiwan either when it comes to how much they supported this trip ahead of time. It was very quiet from the island, too. So I think that's also kind of telling.
All right, 30 seconds left. Give me an idea of how this visit is being seen from other countries around the globe.
Well, I think it's kind of quiet. I think that's also kind of telling in a way, too, because, you know, there's a lot of willingness in the U.S. to want to link this to what's happening in Ukraine. But let's remember that Taiwan does not have the diplomatic relations that Ukraine does around the world. It's only got about 14 other states that it has relations with. So a lot of countries do business with China, and the one China policy is something that they sign on to when they strike relations with Beijing. And to some degree, the U.S. has, too. So I don't know if we're going to see an outswelling of support for this.
Okay, time will tell. Tom O'Connor, many thanks to you.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, two San Francisco leaders facing controversy, and now Mayor London Breed is responding. Our media partners at the SF Standard will join us with her response next. Okay, we are in break number 2, scrolling through some of these Facebook comments. Randy writing in, thank you so much. Sorry we couldn't get a chance to ask your question about one China policy and your views on Pelosi and how she framed her visit. And then also Don, thank you for tuning in as well. Please let us know where you are joining in from. Part of the fun, for me at least, being a part of this show is seeing not only from the Bay Area, but how far away everyone is tuning in on, because nowadays you don't necessarily have to be in the Bay Area with Facebook, and then also with streaming. Our programming is available all over the place. So coming up, I'm very curious to hear what you all think if you follow San Francisco politics, because I'm leading this next segment off with a little phrase that says the plot thickens, because really that's how it feels like oftentimes. And there's also an extra layer of, there's a racial component oftentimes. Oh, Douglas, how much time did you say? Oh, 15 seconds. Oh, no time at all. Okay. Oh, 58 seconds. Okay. Oh, I see. 52. Thank you. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Yes. Oh, thank you very much. I did not see the 2 full screens, Sherry. Let me see. Oh, I see them now. Okay, thank you. Let me take a look at them. For all of you who are watching, that was Fearless Leader Sherry, our producer for today, giving me some show notes, saying that we have 2 graphics that she would like me to pay attention to and be cognizant of for timing purposes. The show hinges upon time. Oh, 10 seconds. We will be right back. Okay, here we go. Thanks for staying with us, everybody. Now, as with seemingly all things San Francisco politics, the plot thickens. President of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, Sean Walton, was accused in a sheriff's memo for his use of the N-word toward a black cadet at City Hall. This, as you can imagine, has caused quite the firestorm of discussion, with Mayor Breed addressing it today. Let's take a listen.
Using the N-word, towards a city employee, especially an elected leader, should not occur, regardless of the politics. There's no reason to, degrade or speak to a member of the city city employees in such a way. And my hope is that the issue was resolved appropriately.
To join us now with more on that issue and to talk more about the mayor's response is the SF Standard senior reporter Josh Kane. Josh, thank you for joining us right away. Despite this messaging from Breed, Sean Walton, he doesn't seem to be backing down from this. He has been so critical of those who do not support him on this issue, how he handled it. What is his plan now?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for having me. Supervisor Walton, who is the president of the Board of Supervisors, has more or less doubled down since these accusations became public last week. He was initially threatening to sue. This afternoon, he offered an amended statement basically saying he has no plans to sue the city, but he has basically said that the events that are being described by the sheriff's office are not accurate, and that it is due to his role in creating an oversight board of the sheriff's department after allegations of excessive force and requiring inmates to even fight in a gladiator-style fight. So he's still very much saying that he did nothing wrong, and this is retaliation.
Well, Josh, something I have to point out is, speaking of suing, do you have any insight as to who he would be suing if he were to proceed? I know he did backtrack.
He did backtrack, so I'm not quite certain who he would sue. A bigger issue, though, is also that maybe he and the board could face some liability. We actually spoke with the cadet, Amari Butler, in an exclusive interview today. And when I talked to Mr. Butler, he told me he has not figured out his plans yet, but the way he laid out the incident was pretty startling. And it definitely shows that there are wildly different stories of what actually transpired.
Yeah, and speaking of that interview, we have a snippet of it we'd like to play where he himself describes the great harm that he felt when Sean Walton, used that N-word. Let's take a listen.
I just felt embarrassed, mostly because, like I said, the whole place stopped. So once the whole place stopped, and seeing that he was putting on this show, I was just like, unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up. It was really more embarrassing than anything, and hurtful, because coming from him, he should know better. You would expect that he would know better, and given his position, you would think that, you would treat the people that's trying to keep you safe with some respect.
Yeah, and given what he just said, what are some actionable things that he can do going forward? What are his plans?
Yeah, he said he's still figuring out what he intends to do in talking to leadership within the sheriff's department. What's fascinating about this situation is that when I talked to Mr. Butler, he said basically that he tried to signal to Supervisor Walton that he would need to remove a belt to get through a security check. It was a Friday before Pride weekend, and apparently there have been times in the past where they've had issues with the supervisor's belt setting off the alarm. The reason that the security protocol is in place is because of the assassination of former late Mayor George Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk back in 1978. So the reason for these security protocols is to make sure that no one can get a weapon through. And so for all of this to transpire over a belt is pretty shocking. And Mr. Butler went on to say that just because he is a black man and Supervisor Walton is a black man doesn't make it any better that, any use of the N-word.
Yeah,
which is still an allegation, I should say.
Yeah, and it's interesting also because the belt, removal is part of his own protection and for his own safety, and then it has blossomed into this. I do want to get to another layer of this complexity because the school board member, Ann Sue, she said during a board meeting that black parents place different values on education than parents from different ethnic backgrounds. Walton has in turn called for her resignation, and you described Mayor Breed walking walking on a tightrope in her response to all of this as well.
Yeah, we spoke with Mayor Breed today, and she has said that she feels like this situation with Supervisor Walton has been handled, obviously, with statements that have come out since that interview. This situation with Supervisor Walton and the cadet are very much not resolved. Supervisor Walton has called for the resignation of the school board member whose comments were very much seen as a racial stereotype against Black men and Black families. She is not, Mayor Breed, I should say, is not calling for the school board member's resignation, saying that it was a mistake and an issue with English as a second language, and obviously there's some learning and understanding needs to go on for the school member's part. Mayor Breed appointed this person after the recall in February, so there are political ramifications if the school member were to resign. There's a lot of racial dynamics going on in San Francisco politics right now, and it speaks to probably what you could say is just larger dysfunction at City Hall.
Yeah, and I know we don't have very much time, but you and I spoke about this prior to the show and how there is this elephant in the room, right? And there is already historically tensions between different ethnic communities, the Black and Asian community, and that adds an extra level of complexity here. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you have witnessed over the course of your reporting?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a lot of reporting about the spike in hate crimes targeting Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders over the course of the pandemic. Of course, the elephant in the room in this whole situation with the school board member is that many in the AAPI community feel like Black Americans are often the perpetrators of these crimes, whether they be attacks or incidents of discrimination. And that is very much an undercurrent to what is going on with the school board situation right now. And so these tensions can't be ignored, and Mayor Breed is definitely put in a tight spot because she appointed Ann Shu and now is not calling for her resignation. She has been critical of the allegations against Supervisor Walton using a racial epithet. And so right now, the dynamics at play are very fluid and very volatile.
Josh Kane, we appreciate your reporting. We also appreciate the partnership that we have together with the SF Standard. Many thanks for you being here. I'm sure we'll see you again very soon.
Thanks, Dion.
And speaking of, you can check out more of the San Francisco Standard's other original reporting at their website, sfstandard.com. And ABC7 will continue to bring you more segments featuring the Standard's city-focused journalism. Stay with us. We will be right back. Okay, we have 2 minutes in the break. Thank you, guys. This show has really flown by. I had meant to also check the Facebook comments, but sometimes you get so engrossed in listening to the response, because I always say as a journalist, you cannot ask the follow-up question without really listening. They always say that listening is more important than necessarily the questions themselves. I do think it's a balance. So let me check the Facebook right now. Tuning in from Sacramento, thank you. And Randy, thank you as well. Alex Kahuna, is that your real name, Alex? What a great, it's a very pleasant sound, Alex Kahuna. Derek writing in as well, commenting about situation in Sacramento. Once again, let me know where you are tuning in from, and also feel free to like this post, share it with your friends, and encourage them to tune in at 3 o'clock. We always are changing our content, having different guests on, really hot topics of the day that can be opening the door to people's questions. So I do want to actually send a message to Josh. Oh, thank you. 1 second. On top of all these other things, my director Douglas knows that I do this on the weekend, but I'm also checking emails and text messages. And he says I do 3 stories also, sometimes. 9 seconds, okay, plenty of time. Let's see. Oh, is there anything in the goodbye? Oh, there is, okay, never mind. That was an iPad thing, okay. Part of your answer. Thank you. As always, thanks so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. I'm Dion Lim, and we will be here every day at 3 on air and live streaming your questions and answers. Okay.